Okay. Hello, Joe Diamede here at Telemombron, sitting in Manaska. The background is a little retreat center in my village, Montbron Bocage. And this weekend we're cooking. Me and my wife are cooking for stage, which is very good food. Thank you, Tanya. And sitting next to me is Tanya, and she has similarities to my children because she's by birth.
I was born in South Africa to a Mauritian mother and a German father, and I grew up like kind of all over the planet.
So she grew up all over the planet, but not in her culture. So known as a third culture kid, a TCK, for those people who like acronyms out there, and my kids as well, American dad, English mom, and were raised in France. So always felt a little bit lost. Sometimes my daughter would come home and say, "The kids ask me, are you French?" And it's like, "Well, no, I'm not really. What kind of food do you eat at home?" It's like, American, English, a little. So I guess that's resonant of your childhood in some ways.
Yeah, well, especially because I grew up for about 7 years in Saudi Arabia, where everybody was kind of at TCK,
Right.
and so, but I didn't know at the time. I had never heard of that term, but so like every week, I'd taste everything from kimchi to curries to fluffy pancakes. You know those flapjacks, and so
Yeah.
it was like I just grew up with all sorts of food. Yeah.
Sure. I mean, and that resonates here as well because we have in this tiny village. There's Swiss German, Belgium, Japanese. So sometimes we'd go out and there's a tinge of French behind it all because we do live in France. So it's quite interesting those multicultural meals and multi languages being spoken at the table because sometimes we'd be at a friend's house speaking French because that was our similar language, and then the mother would turn to the daughter and speak in German, and then there would be an English guy come in, we speak in English. So I guess you grew up with that, and that's why you speak how many languages? Is it five?
I speak five languages, yeah. English, French, German, Italian, and Mauritian Creole.
Right. And do you consider any of them your mother tongue?
Well, I would say that intellectually I'm English because English speaking, because I grew up fluctuating between American schooling, British schooling, and South African schooling, also university level. So, but culturally and emotionally, I'm certainly not Anglo-Saxon.
Right. Because did you ever have you ever lived in England?
I have. I lived there once when I was about 10, and then again in my 20s and 30s, but on and off, because my whole life I've lived in places like 2 or 3 years and then moved on.
Right. It sounds very familiar. Very familiar. Well, our kids will spend the bulk of their life here, but we did a lot of traveling in between, and it's great in many ways. So there's upsides and downsides, obviously, to everything in life. And so so you wrote the book. Third. What was the name of that book again? I'm sorry.
No, I've written two books of poetry. The first one's called Hyphen, which is about being a go-between, sort of. So I didn't feel like I was, anything really. So I thought, okay, I'll be the hyphen between words.
Okay. Cool.
Right? So with all those different cultures and stuff, I felt like I was a bit, yeah, of a hyphen.
Right. And then the other book.
The other book is called Water Flame or Fiamma d'acqua because it's bilingual in English and Italian. Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
And that also is about how water. So for me, growing up as a third culture kid, I always like the one. I wouldn't say negative side, but the challenge is getting a sense of belonging.
Sure. Sure.
And so for me, water is connection. Like the water is the connection between the countries. So water is home for me. So the ocean, etc., are very much are an important part of feeling at home. Apart from the people I love, but it's more those elements of nature that create a sense of belonging for me.
Right. Yeah, and it makes sense. I mean, that is what connects the world. 75% of our world is made up of water. We're made of water, right? We mimic the earth in that we're made up 75% of water. So that's very good. And so, we were speaking yesterday, and you were talking about the downside. So the connection and not having kids you grew up and went to high school with and go back to the old neighborhood. You don't have an old neighborhood.
No, I don't. And then this sense of restlessness. Like I sometimes get really bored where I'm living, so I'll change the living room into the bedroom.
Okay.
just like most people are scared of change. I'm kind of scared of stability,
Right.
right? Not, but it's more with places. So strangely enough, I mean, a lot of third culture kids are very attached to the people who are important for them because they haven't had that huge network. So your close family and your lovers, etc., are really, really important to you.
Right.
Yeah.
Because yeah, you give a lot of importance to that one connection in life because maybe you didn't even grow up with your grandparents. So some older woman in your village became grandma.
Yeah, yeah. So it's like really but there's a restlessness with places. We tend to be what a lot of people call multipotentialites nowadays. You know, there's that term banding around, where you don't have just one skill but many skills. So there again, it can be great because you can be the glue in an organization and multitasking, but it can also be like, who are you?
Yes. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And you know, it can come across as schizophrenic.
Right,
You know,
right.
not like schizophrenic, but I mean, yeah.
But again, that resonates here because you know this little village here is a lot of people who've blown in from other parts of the world. This is the only place I've ever lived in the world where 90% of the inhabitants have chosen to live here. So we don't really. It's a great place. Yeah, yeah, it's a great place. But many people do all these different things. Like we're cooking this weekend, and Angie makes the cushions that you saw before, and she used to teach yoga, and she does the and she dances. She's in a band. I fix bicycles. I build houses. I write books. I do this channel. This channel doesn't bring me any any money, which I'm glad about. Ah, and but yeah, but anyway, it's very good to be, you know, to have all these multifacets in your life. But again, when people say, "So what's your métier in French? What's your profession?" Oh,
Well, I nowadays just say poet because to me, poetry connects everything. So whether I'm doing, yeah, so whether I'm doing body work or writing or performing or teaching, I always bring poetics into it. Yeah. So that kind of gives me a sense of connection between everything.
yeah, yeah, yeah. That's writing. I think word. I mean, for me, I find it in words as well. I've written a few books, and I find it very cathartic, a nice way. Because I'm not a third culture kid. I mean, maybe I'm the old-fashioned third culture kid because I was an Italian American with Italian grandparents. Grew up in New York in the Bronx, so I was American, quote unquote, with Italian traditions. Had never really been to Italy. Don't speak Italian because my grandparents moved at the time where you didn't do that. But so I always felt restless. And when I started traveling, I felt at home. And that's the only time I felt at home in America was on my motorcycle or on my bicycle. And then I moved around the world quite a lot as a young adult. Yeah, and as a family. So that restlessness was in me. I was a third culture kid almost, but I definitely we raised. Angie and I raised two third culture kids for sure.
And then the positive side is that growing up in a culture that's not necessarily your home culture, you are more sensitive to other cultures. So it's sort of like languages. The more different cultures you've been exposed to, the more you're able to understand other ones. So you become more expansive in your worldview.
Yes, and that was one thing I did love about watching our children grow up because they had this other life that they brought into our house, with their French friends and their French perspective and their French schooling, and it was opening a different world to us. And then as they got older, now they're 17 and 21, I could see that their humor switches, American, English, French, and they get all three, and at a level that Angie and I don't get the French. And even to a certain extent, Angie doesn't get the American and I don't get the English. They get all three because they grew up bouncing around all three and being surrounded by it. And the French culture is very very different, but my kids get it, and it's strange to see the other side of them that I really don't know intimately.
Well, it's like Fabrizio tells me that he's married to five women through me. Because it's kind of like he doesn't know who's gonna wake up. Like, am I gonna be the Mauritian? Am I gonna be the German? Am I gonna be the South African? Am I gonna be the person who grew up as an expat in Saudi Arabia? Am I gonna
Yeah, I can imagine.
yeah, am I gonna be the Italian now that I live in Italy? So yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and it's so interesting the fluidity because that's what this whole weekend is about. This fluid movement, I think it's quite excellent because it ties right into this third culture kids. Because I see that with my eldest Louis. He moved to America right before COVID, and he was starting to make his life there, and he felt quite at home. He was working in a bike shop, and he's going to move up to Vermont. He had an apartment, a car, and then he came here to visit. COVID hit, and after a second flight got canceled, he's like, "Oh well, I'll find a job here in France." And so, how cool was that? Picked up a phone, got a job in a bike shop, made his life here, and now he's here. My daughter was going to move to England. That didn't happen because of COVID, and they're both living in France, but they feel at home in America. They feel at home in England.
Yeah, and so and then it's like now with COVID, it's been for me personally, it's been a bit difficult accepting these limits because it's just not the way. I mean, I don't feel nationalistic in any way. You know, like I feel like if I say that I'm one thing, then I'm betraying other aspects of myself. So for me to now be, you know, now it's better, but at one stage it was like we couldn't even move out of the quartier of our city. So that was like I'm like this is not. I mean, I know that globalization gets a bad rap and stuff, but there's another side to it. You know, we've been nomads before we became settlers, right? So that nomadic aspect to humanity, I think, is incredibly important.
Yes. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, I know it would thrive me.
Diversity and enriches.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. For sure. Enriches the planet. That's how we exchange cultures. That's how we exchange food. Look at the food we're cooking this weekend. It's a multicultural melange of everything. Spices from India and British food and yeah. So it's that's what this planet thrives on, and we have to get back to that. And hopefully we are slowly but surely.
Yeah, I hope so.
Well, that was really great. So, Third Culture Kids, looks like your group is coming back, and that was really interesting. TCK, I guess you could look up books and other
There are
things.
forums, there are books. For me, it helped me a lot not to have a label because I don't believe in labeling myself or other people, but it really gave me a context. And I sort of thought, oh, there's other people like me, so actually I do belong to this type of culture.
Right,
You know, that is maybe a bit more fluid
Yeah.
and less, less boundary operating. But yeah,
Yeah.
so I definitely recommend anybody who feels that sense of restlessness or a lack of belonging to check that term out and see the available literature.
Cool. Well, look, thank you very much, Tanya. It was really lovely meeting you, and Fabrice, your husband. Well, that I didn't know that, and so there you go. You see, you learned something. And talking about fluidity and change, everyone's used to me with a hairy face. That's changed in the last couple of days for the first time. So it's the first time you're seeing me without hair on my face. For those people watching my channel, I had that little goatee
No way.
for forever. Yeah, yeah.
Okay, yeah, I can see you with a goatee.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah. You met me the first day, but now you know me more hairless.
I've
Oh,
always been hairy, but here.
well, yeah, as you can see, that's not a problem I have. Okay, very good. Tanya, thank you very much. And give me your last name so people can look up your books.
It's Haberland, Haberland. So my website is tanyahaberland.com.
Okay. So if anyone into poetry, and you don't have to be a third culture kid to like her poetry. Okay, thank you very much again. Joe Diamede, Telemann Braun from beautiful Manaska as the sun sets, and we're having just beautiful weather at the moment. Thank you.